Guys, welcome to today's video where I'm going to show you how to put together an off-grid sink using an electric water pump. And the main point of this video is really just to show you the versatility of installing a DC distribution fuse block to any 12-volt source you have. Whether you're like me and you have a solar power setup with a 50 amp hour 12-volt lithium iron phosphate battery, or you want to try to use your starter battery and just make sure it stays charged and only use it for small amounts of time, that should work as well. You might have a dual battery setup. Whatever it is you use, this should work for any 12-volt source. It takes DC power. To start out, let's assemble our DC fuse block. You can get this thing on Amazon, no problem. I'll link it in the description. I'm going to use a 5 and a 10 amp fuse, one fuse for the water pump and one fuse for the refrigerator, which I'm switching to DC power for efficiency reasons. So the device power goes here. There's the positive on the fuse side, and then you just ground it on one of those 3 lugs right there. And to power the DC fuse block, all you need to do is get a 12-volt power source through an adequately sized cable. These are, I believe, 12 American wire gauge lines. So I'm just gonna strip them down, put some heat shrink onto the end, and then put a terminal on each end. And the negative side goes on one end, and the positive side goes on the opposite end, and that's it. So now I'm doing the thing where I just twist the wire together, put that heat shrink wrap over it, crimp the terminal onto the wire firmly using an appropriate tool, and then the fun part with fire. Man, I never get tired of seeing that heat shrink do its thing and shrink itself down onto that, making a waterproof and secure fit for the terminal on the end of those wires. Now I'm just doing the same thing to the positive side. So the negative side will go on like this and give ground to our fuse block, and the positive side simply goes on the other side. So again, I'm using a 12-volt 50 amp hour lithium iron phosphate battery, but this will work with any 12-volt source. So other than the water pump, this is the other device I will be adding to my DC fuse block, and it is basically a way for me to get power to my fridge using a cigarette lighter type output. And it has some USB-A outputs as well as a voltmeter, just so I can keep an eye on the battery voltage without having to check my Renogy app all the time. I could just look in there and see what it looks like, and it's got a nice bright light. It also has an on-off switch, so I can cut power to it at any time. Let's take a look at the wiring diagram for this. As you can see, you have power and ground going to the device itself, and then you just distribute the power and ground to each separate of the 4 devices accordingly. The initial one goes into the switch side, and then again, you just distribute them around to each of the devices. An important note here is how it is wired. I actually paid too much attention to the color of the pins, silver and gold, rather than looking at the actual wiring diagram itself, and ended up wiring this wrong my first try. So hopefully you guys are better at reading diagrams than I am. It's pretty much impossible to screw this up if you just take your time and think about it. What I did is, since ground and power go to the switch directly, and then you're distributing power from the switch, like you see here in this diagram, the power goes to a silver pin, right? And the output for power from the switch goes to gold pins on the devices. Well, I wired it going to silver pins all the way around. So I accidentally put the power on the ground side of all the devices while having it correct on the switch side. Just make sure you take a look at the diagram and follow it more closely than I did, and you won't have any issues. It's actually very simple. So here's my wrongly wired device. So those ones on the powered devices just need to be swapped around. Not a big deal. I just found that out the hard way later. So this is my current setup. Everything is flowing through to an AC inverter, and that's about to change when I install this DC fuse block. Again, all I need to do is, I don't really need to mess with the AC system I currently have. That's actually a really good backup to have, as I found out when we went on a trip and we're bumping all over the place. All I need to do is find a place to mount these two things, the device to power the fridge with the voltmeter and the switch and the USB outlets, and the fuse block itself. For that 4-input device, I'm just basically putting a bolt straight through the middle into my SMW off-road molly panel. There's nice holes there that allow for this, and actually it fits up pretty well. I was worried if I was going to be able to do this and still access it, but it's great. Now I'm going to try to get the fuse block as close to the battery as possible, because every bit of length of wire you have, you get some sort of voltage drop through the line. So I'm just going to try to minimize that. Not a huge deal if it's, talking about a couple inches or so, but I thought I'd go for efficiency on this one anyway. Again, like I mentioned before, you can see here that I realized my mistake after seeing that the fridge would not power up. So I went ahead and got that 4-input device back out of its mounting place, rewired those things to go on the correct pin, and it was totally fine after that. I felt really dumb after that, but it's all good. I need to share these things with you guys so you don't make the same mistakes that I do. The only reason I realized this was the case is that the switch was working properly. It would light up and, I could switch it on and off and stuff, but the rest of the 3 devices were not powering up. So I knew there was something between the switch and those devices, because the switch was wired properly. It had the positives on the correct, pins, and the negative on the correct pin. However, when the pin switched colors on the powered devices, that's when I got into trouble. So I just reread the diagram and was able to realize my mistake that way. So yeah, hopefully that's helpful for you guys if you ever try to do something like this. Again, dumb mistake, but I'm totally willing to be the test guinea pig for you guys so you could save a little time. So let's see if the device will power on and run the fridge. And as you can see, we have great success with that, and we can actually read out the battery voltage. So we have the positive and the negative going to both sides of those terminals to the fuse block, and then the device positive, negative going up to our DC power distribution up there. It's as simple as that, guys. You can add up to 6 devices, as you can see. And now we're going to add our water pump and sink setup. To do that, the wire's out this side window, so it goes straight to the sink that I have that kind of goes next to my vehicle when I'm out camping. I already started wiring up the water pump with the positive and negative going into the fuse block, and now I'm just working out how to put the switch in there. So I need to tap into the line at some point to get my on-off switch for the water pump. So that's basically what I'm doing here. I started by finding the ideal spot where I think the water pump will easily hang down into a tub or bucket with a bunch of water in it. And then I got a wire stripper, stripped out some parts of the sheathing and then the actual cover for the wire. And this is just on the positive side again. Now I'm getting the wire for my switch, and I'm going to see if I can go ahead and split that positive wire up, putting it into the switch and out of the switch so that I can control when the water pump is powered on and when I want it off, because you definitely do not want to just leave the water pump running with a valve for the water closed. That's a quick way to burn out any sort of electric motor. So let's venture out to the mountains and see if my little MacGyver project is actually going to work. I was really unsure about even making a video for this one, the extra effort to film everything, because I gave it 50-50 odds of success, to be honest. So here you can see I'm actually getting a water container, dropping the water pump into the water inside the container. And then we're going to see if my water pump actually powers on with the switch setup that I just wired up down the mountain. All right, here's the switch. And here I actually forgot to open the valve, so the water pump is pushing against a closed valve, which did not work in hindsight. As you can see, I am stoked that I now have a sink. One of the biggest problems I have with camping is how dirty your hands get and stuff, and I hate using hand sanitizer. It just dries my hands out, so this is such a nice alternative to have. In addition, you could just clean dishes right out there with some dish soap and not worry about having to, conserve, what little bottled water you have with you. You could kind of just take them over to the sink, rinse them off, soak them in some soapy water, and check out that full setup with the paper towel roll and stuff like that. I feel like I'm a real overlander now. So that's what this mod has given me, is just real convenience. Really happy with how it turned out. Let me know if you guys like this setup and what else I should add to my fuse block in the future. And for watching today's video, we'll see you in the next one.